everyone, it's me again. I've got that creative itch again, and I am in dire need of a creative outlet. And I have eyed up my mini little bookshelf. So before, some of the mini projects that I've done have been a couple of little bedside tables. Put one there and then one there. I've decided that I want to do the bookshelf in a similar vein. I've done a little bit of planning. I will put the, this is what it looks like at the moment. And this is what I want it to vaguely look like when it's done. I don't tend to plan these things very much. I'm gonna see if it unscrews and go from there. So yeah, join me. First things first, I laid down an old towel to protect the floor. Okay, so I'm gonna start by unscrewing it. I think I've seen it has some screws. And to my absolute delight, it does indeed just unscrew. I quickly realised that the juicy tracksuit was not ideal DIY attire. So presenting cargo pants. So just like the screws in my head, I went from loosening them completely to taking them all out. And I realised it would be sensible to mark each of the pieces so I knew exactly how to put it back together. Plot twist, it did nothing to help me put it back together. Once it was all in pieces, I gave it all a wipe down with a microfiber, as it had already been a cherished and dusty bookcases for many years now. I found a little tub for the screws to keep them safe, and then it was time to choose some colours. I tend to use emulsion testers for most of my paintings, as I just really like the way that they work and I love the near watercolour-like way that they paint. So going from the reference image, I selected a few options, finally settling on these. The absolute star of the show is this shade Neptune. I'm not usually a fan of blue, but from the first coat I knew I was onto a winner. One of the things I absolutely love about painting onto wood is that the wood drinks in all the pigments and just gives such a gorgeous vibrancy. So I painted the first coat of Neptune onto all of the outside bits of the bookcase, painting the first face, leaning them up to rest. I did 2 coats on the first face before I turned them over and began on the backs. Which themselves had 2 coats and were left to dry. Okay, so it is day 2. Last night I spent a little bit of time I'll put the picture there. So I spent some time just sort of going over what I want the design to look like a little bit more, in a little bit more detail than my first attempt, which was a little bit basic. Yeah, I'm really happy with how that looks, and I hope I've got all of the right paint for it, but I have run out of the blue paint that I was using to do the bookshelf, so I'm gonna get ready and head to Wilko, and hopefully they've got some more of the same shade. See you in a second. Get ready with me for Wilko. A rockstar January fit by all accounts. Since this is literally wall emulsion, it's usually super difficult to get bright colours, but today we were fruitful. Right, we are back. I bought myself this chocolate rose, and I was walking through town with it as an accessory, and I love the energy that it gave me. There was quite a few people who I felt like I could 2 of the Neptune colour that I needed, so that's excess. And they also had After Hours that I have been looking for months. After Hours is one of my favourite shades to use in painting, so I bought 2 of those as well. I also went for this John Stone's Dark Angel purple. I'll put pictures of these on the screen. Yeah, it's an okay purple. I was looking for a magenta-y pinky shade that Wilco do called Plumberry, but they haven't had that in so long. Bring back Plumberry. Also got myself not 1, but 2 sets of heart chocolates, starting the season early, and more rhinestone chain. I can never have enough rhinestone chain. Yeah, so I'm probably gonna finish painting the rest of the outside of it in the Neptune and put a first coat on the other shelves. I've had a bit of a thought, and especially since the After Hours is back in stock, if I put my rendition of what I wanted it to look like here, and then magic over the top add what I wanted to do with the After Hours. I'm not 100% sure if that's what I want to do right now, so I'm gonna get the first coat on the other shelves and get the Neptune done fully and have a think, try and make a decision. And I'll also paint some swatches of the Dark Angel as well. So let's go. This is sort of self-explanatory. I give the Neptune a second coat over all of the outer pieces. Then, still being unsure on which colours I wanted to use, I began painting swatches on the edge of one of the shelves, just to see what the paint would look like when it was finally dry on the wood. Now that the outer boards were completely dry, I could line up the shelves to start painting them. I was still so undecided on what colours I wanted to use, so I opted to trial it out in a sketchbook. I painted representations of the outer boards with the Neptune, then masked it all off, and began painting the colours that I'd chosen as a guide. I always take the masking tape off too soon. Okay, so we are at this point. I have finished my swatches and I'm trying to decide whether I want it to be warm to cold or cold to warm, if that makes sense. So on the original picture I had it this way round. So like cold to warm. And I don't know whether I would prefer it to be that way round. My only thought is I don't know how it's going to look with the Neptune next to the ruby. This sky blue and red might be a little bit clashy. Whereas the blue, having the blue at the top, goes together a lot better. I don't know. So do we think that this clashes? Okay, so last minute executive decision 2 is I'm going to try and mix a tiny little bit of purple in with the ruby just to make it more of a cherry red, and then I feel like a cherry red would go better. Oh, I'm already second guessing it. Let's just get the shelves painted and hope that I can change their order afterwards. And that's exactly what I did, beginning with my favourite shade, After Hours. I then went completely off script and I mixed the After Hours together with the purple shade, Wizard. It made a really nice, you guessed it, purpley blue, but I was constantly adding more of each to get the colour I wanted. The purple shade Wizard was a lot pinker than I'd realised, so it actually worked really well standing in for the Plumberry. Then I mixed the purple shade once again, but this time with the ruby ring red shade. It made a really nice cherry red, and I was making sure to keep the colour mixed and consistent all the way along the shelf. I love how during the next few coats you can see it drying as I go. And this is the final colour of those shelves. I mean, they are still a bit wet, but you get the idea. Okay, it is day 3. And executive decisions have been made. However much I absolutely love the Neptune colour, it's a little bit too different to the dark, deeper colours. So what I've decided to do is I'm just gonna put a bit of a dark bluer gradient shade on it, and I'm hoping to at least get the painting done today. That way I should be able to get a varnish layer on tonight, and I'm hoping I'm only going to need 1 layer of varnish, but let's get the painting done. Let's go. So this was a lot more challenging than I expected. Starting with a wash that I'd made by watering down the After Hours blue and painting the edges slowly, trying to blend it into the middle subtly. Subtlety was the idea with the gradient. For the inside of the shelf edges, I wanted the gradient to be in between each shelf, so it took a lot of time to get these blended, but for a first coat and I wash, I knew it would dry out a lot more faded, so I could use it as a guide. My original plan was to then mix Neptune and After Hours together to blend, but this was not working. The face of regret. Deciding to just roll with it, I kept going, trooper that I am. Building up that darker blue more and more, trying to ignore how bad it looked. But at this point I hated it. I decided to soften the blend with just water, which still didn't help. So in an act of madness, I went in with a heavy hand of deep blue. It was at this moment, a moment of madness, chaos, hopelessness, I had an idea. Deciding to ditch the brush, I found an old faithful, the Humble Beauty Blender. This was a godsend. Using the Beauty Blender to, blend, I was able to load the front of it with the deep blue colour and then use the back of it to buff it out and into the Neptune colour. Hands covered in paint, but a new lease of energy into this project, I continued on. Okay, so it is now the evening of day 3. Look, I am so happy with how this is turning out with the gradient. So I think I'm ready to start doing the design on the front of this bit. So I'm going to sit down this evening and try and get that done. Back in my nest for the evening, I began sketching out the design that I wanted to put on the top flourish of the shelf. This was my original design, but after the success of the gradient, I felt it gave off a bit of a Beauty and the Beast vibe with the stained glass window, so I took inspiration from that for the shape of the stems and the leaves, as well as changing the central mandala for more of a rose lotus style flower. I then blocked out the area I was going to paint the design on in white, making sure somewhat to keep it detailed and as sharp looking as possible. Okay, I'll admit, I didn't expect this to need to go into... But we're here, and we are getting it done today. I am going to paint this, and then varnish the whole thing, hopefully one coat, and then put it back together, put it in the right place, put the books on it. Let's go!
So just taking normal acrylics, I started painting the details of the designs, mixing green in with yellow and making the stems have shadows and highlight. It looks so much sunnier in this footage than it was outside. For the flower and the berries, I chose a magenta and some purple shades and went about detailing it with the world's tiniest paintbrush. After giving it a second coat, I decided the centre stone in the flower ought to be the Neptune, the blue colour, the same as the bookcase. And retreating back into the nest, the hyperfixatious began the fun part. First, using an eraser to get rid of the final pencil marks, I used a gold marker to draw dots around the centre stone, then to outlining with black. In an attempt to counterbalance the thick outline, I outlined it again in white. And it really gave it this gorgeous cartoony graffiti look. Okay, so this is how it's looking. Now I've painted the design on the front. It's not quite as delicate or soft feminine as I would have liked, but I'm super happy with how it's turned out. Now I just have to varnish the whole thing and screw it back together. So let's... This was the final push. And having never worked with varnish like this before, I was apprehensive. But as it turns out, I didn't need to be. It looked amazing! So I gave the shelves and the flourish pieces 2 coats, leaving them to dry for 20 minutes in between. Then I checked them over for any parts that I'd missed, and made sure to give those faces an extra coat. Finally, I varnished the last 3 pieces, the 2 sides and the bottom lip. After that was dry, I went over it a final time before I was fully happy with it. And then Cinderella put away all the materials from one project before starting something new. Now this part I completely underestimated. I'll be honest, I had absolutely no idea how I was going to get this thing back together. Therefore I tried and failed no less than 3 times to fit the bottom crossbar in at least 8 different positions. Putting my hair in sports mode, I decided to weaponize the last dregs of my energy into beating this damn bookcase. And I'll be honest, once the bottom shelf was on it, it all magically started to come together. Every shelf I added made it somewhat more sturdy, and I began to feel hope. At this point, I completely stopped considering what the camera was seeing, so here, have a shot of my back, and the tufty undercut. The final shelf went on, and you can see on my face how great I feel about it. Screwing in the top flourish was the absolute finish line, and apparently I am beaming with pride as I give all the screws one final check. "Look!" she exclaims, and is so happy. She embraces and kisses the inanimate object. I was super tired, so the next day, I placed the bookcase where I wanted it and began adding all of my books back into it. Getting distracted and flicking through a couple. But let's be honest, it was done! I could not be happier that it was finally done, and to really give my final thoughts, let's go back to Hyperfixie. So my final thoughts then. I am absolutely in love with how it looks. There's going to be pictures that I'm going to put here because I am a proud mum with this piece, I really am. Did it take 3 times as long because I decided to film the process? Yes. Was it a learning experience? Yes. But am I happy with it? Yes. This is a fantastic project that I'm really proud that not only did I start it, I filmed it, I finished it. I finished it. Oh my god, I finished a project. So yeah, I've had an absolute whale of a time, if you can't tell, and I'm super buzzed about how it looks. So if you enjoyed coming along for the trip, don't forget to hit like. If you want to stick around, hit subscribe. Apart from that, let's see where I go next. Bye!